Hello, I'm Dilek Tuna. You're watching A News. Let's see the headlines. A 10th night of strikes between the US and Iran as Trump warns of retaliation for troops killed. Canada's Prime Minister vows to intensify trade talks as the US slaps a 50% tariff on imports. And Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev starts his official visit to Germany, with bilateral ties topping the agenda. The US has warned of retaliation for the death of troops serving in the conflict with Iran after a 10th night of strikes. Iran says it's hit US military sites in Kuwait and Bahrain, damaging air defense and radar systems, along with 2 oil tankers in the Strait of Hormuz. Here's more.
The United States has carried out a 10th consecutive night of airstrikes on Iran, with the latest 5-hour operation ending late on Monday. US Central Command said in a post on X that the latest strikes had hit Iranian military command centers, maritime capabilities, missile and drone launch sites, and air defense systems. Washington says the campaign is aimed at reducing Iran's ability to threaten commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. The latest attacks come after President Donald Trump vowed to retaliate following the deaths of 3 US soldiers, 2 in Jordan and 1 in Iraq. Meanwhile, on Tuesday, the United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations Agency says a tanker in the Strait of Hormuz has been struck by an unidentified projectile, forcing its crew to abandon the vessel. The UKMTO says the incident occurred 8 nautical miles northeast of Lima, Oman, and is under investigation. Separately, Iran's Revolutionary Guards say that 2 oil tankers had caught fire after explosions while attempting to transit the southern route of the strait. The guards say rescue teams were removing the crews from the area, but did not identify the vessels. Reuters could not independently verify the guards' statement or whether the 2 incidents were connected. Meanwhile, the IRGC say they've targeted US military facilities in Kuwait on Tuesday. During the night, Jordan said its air defenses intercepted 3 Iranian missiles with no casualties or damage reported, and Bahrain said it also destroyed multiple aerial threats. Earlier in the day, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian declared what he described as a full-scale war with the United States. However, Iran's foreign ministry also said it had received mediation proposals and the diplomatic channels remain open.
Now to Yemen, where the Saudi-backed government says it will resume oil exports to fund salaries, public services and economic stability.
In line with our responsibility to ease suffering, we announce that we will work on resuming oil exports by all means starting today, and direct the revenues to serve the Yemeni people everywhere. Our priorities include meeting the state's basic obligations, paying salaries, improving services and supporting economic stability, ensuring that Yemen's wealth returns to all Yemenis instead of remaining hostage to the militia's recklessness and extortion. I would also like to remind you that the government has, over the past period, been committed to exercising the highest degree of restraint after the militia's targeted oil facilities.
The Saudi-led coalition has vowed to protect commercial shipping in the Bab al-Mandab Strait after Yemen's Houthis announced a ban on its vessels. A coalition spokesperson said all necessary measures would be taken to safeguard ships using the strategic waterway and will respond to any threats. He called the Houthi ban an escalation, saying more than 300 commercial vessels reached Houthi-controlled ports with food and fuel during the first half of the year. The Iran-backed groups say the ban was a reciprocal response to what they described as nearly 12 years of Saudi restrictions. Lebanon's president is heading to the White House on Tuesday for talks with President Trump in the first visit by Lebanese leader in nearly 2 decades. Lebanon will present a written plan to disarm Hezbollah and seek US pressure for an Israeli withdrawal from the south. The proposals are part of a US-brokered effort to restore Lebanese state control and ease tensions with Israel. The visit comes just days after Israeli drone strikes killed at least 4 people. Israel's withdrawal from positions it still holds in southern Lebanon, the deployment of the Lebanese armed forces into designated pilot zones, and the broader objective of strengthening Lebanese state authority in areas long influenced by Hezbollah are all expected to top the agenda during talks. Joining me now is Gustavo de Aristegui, former diplomat from Rabat, Morocco. Ambassador, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, President Joseph Aoun's meeting with Trump comes at what appears to be a crucial moment in the implementation of the US brokered framework. From a diplomatic perspective, what do you believe each leader most wants to achieve from today's talks?
Well, I think it's a huge path forward. Let us not forget that, unfortunately, Lebanon has been a hostage of Hezbollah and therefore of Iran for the last 44 years, since Hezbollah was created in '82. It's a great step forward also because Lebanon needs very desperately the help of Western countries and especially the United States of America. Let us not forget that the Lebanese armed forces have an annual budget of a ridiculous $700 million, and that the Iranian regime contributes to the armament and so-called military operations of Hezbollah in more than $1 billion. The informal revenue of Hezbollah is also calculated in about $3 billion. All of their illegal traffics, captagon, drugs, weapons, etc. Right now, the Lebanese state needs to be reinforced. The Lebanese armed forces need to be armed, trained, and financed. And the sovereignty of Lebanon needs to be restored. And this is a very important step in the right direction.
Ambassador, how do you view US mediation in keeping both sides engaged? How important is it?
Well, this is one of the indications and one of the examples that the United States is not always transactional. It is not always in maximalistic positions, as has been sometimes the case of the foreign policy of this Trump administration. I think that this is one of the success stories, as was Gaza, albeit all the difficulties, Burma and Thailand, and so many others. I think that right now we need to understand that the United States is trying to preserve the civilian objectives in the south of Beirut and pressing Israel to understand that there is a very big difference between legitimate targets of a terrorist organization, as is the case of Hezbollah. But of course, they need to be careful because Hezbollah is hiding in different kinds of neighborhoods. And I know this for a fact. I have family in Beirut. I speak to them every day. They are hiding in Ashrafiyeh. They're hiding in Beit Meri, in Hazmiyeh, in Sunni cities and neighborhoods, in Christian neighborhoods. Of course, most of them are being expelled by the residents themselves, but others are very tightly, very strongly hidden and barricaded in these neighborhoods. Okay, so yes, it's a very important gesture of the United States.
So staying on that, Hezbollah being scattered throughout the country, one of the central issues is the withdrawal of Israeli forces still stationed in parts of southern Lebanon. How realistic is it to expect further withdrawals while Israel continues to argue that Hezbollah must first be prevented from re-establishing a military presence?
Of course, but we all agree that Hezbollah needs to be disarmed. The problem is that Iran will not accept it, and the problem is that Hezbollah is going to resist everything, every attempt. Let us not forget that one of the reasons this war started is because one of the requirements of the United States on February 27th, besides uranium enrichment and missile programs, was to stop financing, to stop arming and training the terrorist proxies of Iran in the region. And of course, the jewel of the crown is obviously Hezbollah. And you cannot demand Lebanon to be a sovereign state if you do not give it the means to be a sovereign state. The Lebanese army, the Lebanese armed forces, and the security forces are no match for 60,000 terrorists armed to their teeth And if we want Lebanon to be sovereign and we want Lebanon to be able to abide by the requirements that all the international community has, that is to disarm Hezbollah and to regain control of all of its territory, it needs help. And going back to the question about the occupation of the South, I have made it very clear in some statements here in your channel several times that the permanent presence of the Israeli Defense Forces between the border and the Litani River is a huge mistake. Because right now there is a phenomenal coalition in Lebanon of over 80% of the Lebanese people that are polled in opinion polls that are completely and fiercely against Hezbollah. The more Israel stays in Lebanese territory and the more the attacks continue, that opposition to Hezbollah is going to weaken, and we will lose a window of opportunity that is unique in the history of the country.
Okay. So under the agreement, Ambassador, the Lebanese armed forces have begun taking control of the first pilot zones. Now, this is significant symbolically, but how important is it operationally in restoring the authority of the Lebanese state?
You're very right in making the difference between one and the other. It is a very important symbolic gesture, but operationally it is still not sufficiently proven that the Lebanese armed forces have the necessary means, manpower, weapons, and operational capabilities. The Lebanese armed forces don't even have an air force. They have some helicopters, but they don't have fighter jets. They don't have attack helicopters. They cannot confront a phenomenally strong militia that is battle-hardened over decades in different theaters of war around the world, not only in the region. So right now, yes, operationally, it is an aspiration. It is not yet a reality.
Okay. So the framework ultimately depends on replacing the influence of non-state armed groups with state institutions. Is that the greatest challenge facing Lebanon?
Without any doubt. You have just you've hit the nail on the head. This is the exact question. For too long, for decades even, non-state actors have been gaining power in different parts of the world. Let us not forget that, for example, the Taliban, before they were in power, were the real rulers of Afghanistan. Let us not forget that Daesh and Al-Qaeda are stronger than some of the nations in the Sahel that they are attacking constantly. Let us not forget that in different parts of Nigeria, Boko Haram is stronger than the local security forces. And Lebanon is the paradigm of this catastrophe. It is a state within the state that is stronger than the state. And the only way to break free of this tragedy is making the state far stronger than the terrorist militia that has completely infected the whole country. Let us not forget also that the Hezbollah organization gives military training to everyone, their administrative staff, their doctors, their ambulance drivers, absolutely everybody. So when people say that there are just 30 or 40,000 terrorist militiamen, we're talking that an organization that has close to 100,000 members, most of them, if not all of them, are trained militarily.
Okay, Ambassador, as a former diplomat, how important are confidence-building measures such as these pilot zones? Can limited successes create the trust needed for more comprehensive agreements?
I think that this, quite frankly, is putting the oxen before the cart. Confidence-building measures are essential once the operational objectives are obtained. The confidence-building measures when Hezbollah is not disarmed and the Lebanese armed forces are not deployed, and the sovereignty of the country, territorial integrity and sovereignty of Lebanon is not fully restored, how are you going to build confidence-building measures? How are you going to implement confidence-building measures if you cannot guarantee the security and the stability of those zones? The only way to do that is to attain the objectives that I just mentioned before.
Ambassador, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your insights today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
After the break, we'll take a look at the latest attacks between Russia and Ukraine. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching A News. Let's turn our attention now to Ukraine and Russia, where both sides are trading accusations after another wave of deadly drone attacks.
In Ukraine's northeastern city of Sumy, a fire engulfed an epicenter hardware store, with Ukrainian officials blaming a Russian drone attack. Ukraine's state emergency service said a separate Russian airstrike in the eastern city hit a 9-story apartment building, injuring 6 people. Search and rescue teams were seen evacuating residents from the damaged building. Regional authorities said emergency operations were complicated by repeated strikes and the continued presence of Russian drones over the area, creating an ongoing threat for rescue crews. The latest attacks come after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Kiev had struck Russian logistical facilities and an oil depot in the Moscow region. Meanwhile, Russia accused Ukraine of carrying out a drone attack on a bus in the Belgorod region, saying 5 civilians, including a minor, were killed and 23 others were injured. Regional officials said 3 of the wounded remain in critical condition. Ukraine did not immediately comment on the claim. Separately, fires broke out overnight at industrial facilities in the western Russian city of Lipetsk, amid unconfirmed reports of another attack.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney vows to intensify trade talks with Washington. It's after the White House announced 50% tariffs on a wide range of Canadian imports due to start next month.
Canada's wine, hockey sticks and cement, among other things, are set to be charged 50% in tariffs when being sent to the US next month. However, key exports such as energy, critical minerals and fish will be exempt from the increase. The United States has imposed fresh tax hikes on nearly $20 billion worth of Canadian imports. President Donald Trump says the reason is that Canada is discriminating against US exports on American cars, alcohol and dairy products. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney says Ottawa was ready to intensify trade talks with Washington in the coming weeks. However, he accused Washington of repeatedly violating the North American Trade Agreement and referred to what he called threats to Canadian sovereignty. Trump invoked Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930, which protects against goods discrimination. This law hasn't been used in more than a century. The measures are due to take effect in 30 days and will apply even to goods covered by the existing US-Mexico-Canada trade agreement.
The first day of the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting is underway in the Philippines, with top diplomats voicing concerns over the hostilities in the Middle East. On Tuesday, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio arrived in Manila for the talks. The conflict between the United States and Iran is expected to dominate discussions alongside tensions in the South China Sea and Myanmar's civil war. Rubio could also hold talks with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi on the sidelines of the summit. Southeast Asian foreign ministers are meeting at a time of growing pressure on the region, from energy security and maritime disputes to questions over Myanmar's political crisis. With senior officials from the United States, China and Russia also attending, the talks are expected to test ASEAN's ability to navigate competing global interests while keeping regional priorities at the centre. Laura Westbrook has more now from Hong Kong.
The Association of Southeast Asian Nations foreign ministers issued a statement expressing deep concerns over renewed fighting between the US and Iran, and they also renewed calls for the full reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. Many countries in Southeast Asia have been heavily impacted by the conflict, as they are big importers of oil and gas from the Middle East. The foreign ministers from ASEAN are also joined by US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and experts say they'll be watching for what reassurances, if any, the US diplomat will make the bloc. China's top diplomat Wang Yi and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will also be in attendance. The Philippines declared a national energy emergency in March. It has turned to Russia for oil to help shore up its supplies. The bloc is expected to discuss whether to readmit Myanmar's military rulers to its high-level meetings for the first time since they overthrew the democratically elected government and seized power in 2021. But ASEAN remains divided on how to deal with Myanmar. Thailand is pushing for Myanmar's reintegration. Other member states, though, aren't happy with the lack of progress on the bloc's long-stalled 5-point peace plan. Malaysian Foreign Minister Mohammed Hassan said in May that he opposed high-level talks while oppression is still taking place. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said he was open to the possibility of sideline meetings with both Lavrov and Wang Yi. But tensions remain over the South China Sea. Before the meeting, Philippine and Chinese sailors clashed at the Second Thomas Shoal. China claims almost all the South China Sea, but there are competing claims from other countries, including the Philippines. The United States condemned what it calls dangerous Chinese actions in the contested waterway. Meanwhile, China's foreign ministry says it had summoned the Philippine ambassador to lodge what it calls solemn representations over the clash. Laura Westbrook for A News in Hong Kong.
Meanwhile, the United States has condemned what it called China's dangerous and aggressive actions against Philippine Navy personnel in the South China Sea. The State Department urged Beijing to stop what it called destabilizing conduct near Second Thomas Shoal. The warning followed a new confrontation between China and the Philippines in the disputed waters. Manila said one Navy personnel was injured, while Beijing accused Philippine boats of ramming a Chinese Coast Guard vessel. China rejected the criticism and said it would continue operations in the area. Now, security, trade routes and cooperation are high on the agenda at the ASEAN foreign ministers and their meeting in Manila. Joining me now to discuss this is Dr. Julia Rocknifad, a senior lecturer at the School of Law and Governance at Taylor's University in Malaysia. Julia, welcome to the program.
Happy to be with you.
Now, with so much of Asia's energy passing through the Strait of Hormuz, how exposed are ASEAN economies if disruption continues?
Oh, pretty exposed. And I think what we've seen in the first round of the war is going to be repeated and probably exacerbated in this second round. And indeed, economies in ASEAN were hit pretty badly. Some worse, some were a little bit better off, especially the oil exporters like Malaysia, where I am right now. But overall, the food prices, the fuel prices, everything went up to that people had to work from home for at least for governmental institutions. And right now, I think we are expecting to be hit even harder. That's why we're hearing talk in the ASEAN foreign ministers meeting that some kind of mechanism needs to be in place in order to mitigate these kind of disruptions.
Okay, and ASEAN is discussing an oil sharing mechanism. Would that genuinely protect member states or simply buy them time?
You know, maybe for the future, what we've seen for now that the countries of the region try to hedge in a way to make inroads to the other markets, to the other oil and gas suppliers, like on his latest trip to Russia. On the way to Russia, Prime Minister of Malaysia, Anwar Ibrahim, stopped by Turkmenistan, for example, and sealed some oil deal, although the question remains about the supply routes for this. Same was done by the other ASEAN members, trying to diversify their suppliers. What concerns this oil sharing mechanism, as I said, probably some hope for this for the future, because right now I don't foresee how the leaders of ASEAN countries can tell their people that, oh, I'm sorry, we are going to share our oil resources or oil and gas resources with our neighbors to stabilize the market, but we will have to endure the rising cost of fuel. So even for the countries like Malaysia or Indonesia or Brunei, I don't foresee them contributing much. This, for now, I think remains a lip service.
Mm-hmm. And if shipping and insurance costs keep rising, how quickly could that affect food prices, inflation and growth across Southeast Asia?
I think pretty quick. Again, the war in the first round lasted for 40 days, but it had long-term implications for the region. Now the escalations are with no end in sight, and the prices here in Southeast Asia rise quite quickly, the fuel prices, and then insurance prices, and then the food prices. And the funny thing about them is that those prices hardly go down. once the situation de-escalates. Now the fuel prices went down a little bit, but there are other things that are increased in cost. For example, the electric energy, and the governments are actually justifying the hike in that by the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz. So we in Southeast Asia feel it pretty quick.
And ASEAN countries rely heavily on trade with Europe and the Gulf. How worried should they be about a wider Middle East conflict disrupting those routes?
I don't think this much, maybe in terms of oil and gas supplies when it comes to the Persian Gulf countries. But to Europe, off the top of my head, when I think about some essential items, there is probably not much, nothing that ASEAN could not do without. It's more about the investments. The EU is, I think, among the top investors into ASEAN. So it's about the financial part, which ASEAN could do for a while without, unlike in the case of food supply. So for Europe, I think we could diversify towards other suppliers.
And after years of talks, are ASEAN and China any closer to rules that could actually reduce tensions in the South China Sea?
It doesn't seem so, especially under the chairmanship of the Philippines, which is a US ally in the region, unless there is some sort of provocation. But even in that case, there is an escalation and the Philippines is dragged into a conflict with China, which I also don't foresee. So I think the Philippines will complete the year as a chair of ASEAN without the strict rules being the final resolution to the South China Sea issue going to be in place. But ASEAN states do not seem, and including littoral states, the claimant states for South China Sea, they don't seem to mind. And instead of that, there are discussions on how the resources of South China Sea could be utilized and mined together with China, having China as a partner instead of escalating it by rising tensions, encroachment into the EEZ and the territorial waters, and bringing in what's worse, foreign players to the South China Sea.
And my last question to you, Julia, with the US, China and Russia all attending, can ASEAN still shape the agenda, or is it becoming a stage for bigger powers?
I think ASEAN stands pretty well on its feet. It's highly and often criticized for its kind of indecisive ASEAN way, its non-interference policy, and that's why, as your colleague, there are issues with resolution of the Myanmar situation. But nevertheless, they are also trying to insulate themselves against the interference of foreign powers. So I think Russia, China, the United States are there, represented by their respective foreign ministers, are there to lobby for their issues, for their agendas, but it's not going to hold a large sway over ASEAN, which has been lately hedging a lot, sometimes away from the US towards Russia or China, which is also quite noticeable. But overall, they're present, they're acknowledged, but not holding such a large sway.
Julia, thank you so much for joining us on the program today. I appreciate your analysis.
Thank you.
After a short break, we'll go over to Germany, where Azerbaijan's President Aliyev begins his official visit. Welcome back. You're watching A News. President of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev, has arrived in Germany for an official visit. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is due to host President Aliyev in Berlin for talks focusing on energy cooperation, critical raw minerals, the Azerbaijan-Armenia peace process, and broader international security issues. Ahead of the meeting with Chancellor Merz, President Ilham Aliyev met with Michael Harms, chairman of the Eastern Committee of the German Economy. Now let's get the latest from A News Deputy-in-Chief Orkan Amashov from Berlin.
Well, I'm joining you from Villa Borsig here in Berlin. President Aliyev is already here, has been received by German President Steinmeier, and currently in that building behind me, they are holding a meeting, one-on-one meeting and also extended meeting. We earlier saw the delegation from both countries being present here as well. And later, of course, the substantive meeting with German Chancellor will take place. There will be press conference. Expectations preceding this meeting are profoundly there. There's a feeling that Germany is changing its approach towards South Caucasus, towards individual countries located in that region, and we confidently expect the document on the joint declaration on the strategic relationship between these two countries to be adopted later, and that document should lay the foundation for further German engagement in the South Caucasus, and also will lay the foundation for the full spectrum of bilateral ties between Azerbaijan and Germany. Orkan Amashov, A-News.
In Gaza, extreme heat is making conditions even harder for families already living in overcrowded tent camps.
Temperatures of up to 40 degrees Celsius are making life even more difficult for families living in Gaza's overcrowded tent camps. Mahmoud Hijazi, who uses a wheelchair after being injured, says his family lives in a worn-out tent barely big enough for them. He says the extreme heat, insects during the day and rats at night make daily life even harder. Because of his health condition, he says he needs a fan, but there is no electricity to run one. Many parents say the heat is taking a heavy toll on their children. Azza Al-Hatto says her tent has become like an oven, while the lack of water and sanitation has contributed to the spread of skin diseases. She says families keep moving from one place to another searching for shade as they wait for water to cool themselves and their children. The International Committee of the Red Cross says families are struggling with the heat, as well as rodents and mosquitoes, and need reliable access to clean water, sanitation, healthcare and safe shelter. The organisation says it and other aid organisations continue supporting displaced families despite ongoing restrictions on aid deliveries and the challenges of bringing supplies safely into Gaza.
Sri Lanka is battling a sharp rise in dengue fever cases caused by the monsoon weather conditions and a more virulent strain of the virus. Hospitals are coming under increasing pressure and the military has been mobilised to help deal with the outbreak.
There are more than 76,000 dengue fever outbreaks in Sri Lanka, with 53 deaths recorded since January. It's the country's worst dengue outbreak in nearly a decade. The mosquito-borne disease has spread across the island as hospitals face a sharp rise in patients, with more than 18,000 cases reported in the first 2 weeks of July alone. Health officials say around 75% of cases are linked to the more virulent DENV2 strain, which is spreading rapidly and contributing to more severe illness. Hospitals have added beds, converted wards and extended working hours for doctors and nurses to cope with the surge.
It's challenging to the doctors because it's a rapid increase of patients. Like all of a sudden you get a big bulk of patients coming into the hospital. So it's challenging. So challenging to the doctors, nurses, the health administrators, everyone.
Military and police have joined efforts to clear stagnant water on rooftops in homes, schools, building sites and religious institutions.
The main focus has been getting rid of vector breeding sites and getting rid of vectors by fogging and the usual things. So there's absolutely no doubt that these measures are very, very important.
Authorities warn cases could rise again when the next monsoon season begins in November. With the virus's multiple strains, Sri Lanka has yet to introduce a dengue vaccine.
Chile has declared a state of catastrophe as fatal floods hit the north of the country. 5 people have been killed and close to 100,000 left homeless after heavy rains triggered floods and mudslides in the Coquimbo region and Huaso province. Homes, roads and infrastructure have been damaged, leading to power cuts and disruptions to water and sanitation. The authorities have deployed soldiers, firefighters and helicopters as forecasters warn more torrential rain could hit the region in the coming days. Uzbekistan and Belarus are moving to deepen their strategic partnership with a focus on trade, industrial cooperation and nuclear energy. Sevil Rajapova reports from Tashkent.
A high-level Belarusian delegation led by Deputy Prime Minister Viktor Kavankevich has arrived in Uzbekistan. During the meeting with President Shavkat Mirziyoyev, the two sides reviewed progress on agreements reached during Mirziyoyev's official visit to Minsk earlier this month and discussed expanding bilateral cooperation. Particular attention was given to implementing a joint roadmap aimed at increasing annual trade turnover to $2 billion by 2030 and advancing cooperation projects in priority sectors of the economy. The talks also focused on Belarus' experience in developing nuclear energy. Officials discussed expert support for the design, construction and future operation of Uzbekistan's first nuclear power plant, as well as training specialists and launching joint programs between universities. Bilateral trade turnover between the two countries reached roughly $1 billion, with an increase by 25% in 2025. The meeting reflects continued efforts by both countries to strengthen economic ties and deepen cooperation on major strategic projects. It is Sivil Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
Iran's Minister of Interior has arrived in Islamabad for a two-day visit to discuss promotion of bilateral ties between neighbouring countries, as well as review regional developments. Tura Shireliliu reports from Tehran.
Heading a high-ranking delegation, Iranian Minister of Interior Iskandar Momeni is visiting neighboring Pakistan. He is accompanied by representatives of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Roads and Urban Development, and Ministry of Agriculture, as well as the Police Force and Customs Department. A state IRNA news agency reported that topics up for discussion relate to strengthening border cooperation and expanding economic, transit, and agricultural ties. And the Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai confirmed on Monday that the Iranian delegation will foster bilateral relations in Pakistan. However, speaking to reporters at Islamabad airport, the Iranian minister confirmed that regional developments will also be discussed during the trip. Pakistan's Interior Minister Mohsen Naqvi, who received Momeni at the airport, said he hoped the visiting minister had brought good news and expressed confidence the visit will strengthen bilateral ties and advance discussions on the regional situation. Islamabad has been a mediator between the United States and Iran and secured a ceasefire memorandum of understanding back in June. This trip places Pakistan at the center of renewed diplomatic engagement as conflict between Washington and Tehran threatens regional stability and global energy security. Momeni will also visit the Pakistani city of Lahore before departing for New Delhi to participate in the third BRICS Disaster Risk Reduction meeting scheduled for the 24th of July. This visit comes at a crucial time with Iran and US targeting each other daily. According to Sepah News website, the IRGC's official portal, 2 oil tankers intending to pass through the Strait of Hormuz were hit early Tuesday and caught fire. Tura Shireliliu from Tehran for A News.
Rescue teams are searching for survivors after flash floods triggered by torrential rain killed at least 20 people and left more than 100 missing in Afghanistan's eastern Nuristan province. The worst hit area is the provincial capital Parun, where more than 80 people were injured and the city's mayor is among those missing. Emergency crews remain at the scene as officials warn the death toll is expected to rise. Taliban authorities have also warned of significant human and financial losses. Staying in the region, Afghanistan and Tajikistan have held talks in Kabul, focused on border-related issues and closer bilateral ties. Tamim Bahis has the details from Kabul.
Afghanistan's Ministry of Defense says its Chief of Military Operations, Nur Rahman Nasrat, has met Tajikistan's Ambassador to Afghanistan, Saadi Sharifi, here in Kabul. According to an official statement, the meeting took place at the office of the Chief of Military Operations of the Ministry of Defense General Staff. The two officials discussed a range of issues relating to the border between Afghanistan and Tajikistan. One particular concern along the frontier has been cross-border violence and the movement of armed groups and criminal networks. In November 2025, Tajikistan said an attack launched from Afghan territory killed 3 Chinese workers near the border. Weeks later, Tajik border guards reported killing 4 armed men who had crossed from Afghanistan, although Afghan officials described the men as drug smugglers rather than militants. However, both sides stressed the importance of expanding bilateral cooperation and improving coordination between the two countries. They also underlined the need to strengthen friendly ties, maintain goodwill and continue dialogue on matters of mutual interests. The Afghan Ministry of Defense said the officials expressed confidence that bilateral coordination between Kabul and Dushanbe would be further strengthened. For now, no further information has been released about possible follow-up meetings or practical measures resulting from the discussions. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Fuel shortages and rising prices are putting fresh pressure on drivers across Kyrgyzstan as disruptions to Russian supplies force Bishkek to look for alternatives. Fariza Kalimurzina has more.
A sharp rise in fuel prices and growing shortages at filling stations are putting new pressure on drivers across Kyrgyzstan. The price of premium EI95 gasoline has climbed to around $1.25 per liter, up from about $1 per liter just days earlier. Premium EI100 has also surged to nearly $1.70 per liter, while drivers in Bishkek and other regions report that EI95 has temporarily disappeared from some gas stations. The price surge is being driven by several factors. Kyrgyzstan relies on Russia for more than 90% of its gasoline imports. But repeated Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian oil infrastructure combined with the rising wholesale fuel prices have disrupted supplies and pushed fuel costs higher. Industry representatives also say the government's decision to ease price regulation has allowed retailers to pass those costs on to consumers. And according to the Kyrgyz Association of Oil Traders, Russian refineries are currently offering mostly diesel fuel, forcing importers to seek alternative supplies from Azerbaijan, China, Belarus and Turkmenistan. Wholesale gasoline prices have more than doubled in recent months, rising from around $700 to $1,800 per ton. To ease the shortage, Kazakhstan has agreed to supply Kyrgyzstan with 15,000 to 20,000 tons of fuel oil every month. The fuel can be refined into gasoline and diesel or just used at thermal power plants during the upcoming heating season. Bishkek has also requested direct supplies of gasoline and diesel, but that request is still under consideration. Kazakhstan has maintained temporary restrictions on fuel exports to prioritize its domestic market, meaning fuel oil is currently the only product being supplied. Farisa Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
The European Union has accused some of the construction industry's biggest chemical suppliers of fixing price increases following the pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Anita Sharma reports.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where the EU accuses some of the construction industry's biggest chemical suppliers of working together to drive up prices in the aftermath of the pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The European Commission sent formal antitrust charges, known as statements of objections, to 10 construction chemicals companies and 3 national trade associations, alleging they coordinated price increases between 2021 and 2022 for chemicals used in cement, concrete, and mortar. The companies named include Cemex, Sika, Criso, Mape, Master Builder Solutions, MC Bochemy, and Lizen. The Commission identified 3 separate suspected cartels covering France, Germany, and Spain, along with trade associations in each country. According to Brussels, the companies allegedly used those trade associations to coordinate press releases that justified higher prices after raw material costs surged during COVID-19 and following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Now, if proven, the conduct would amount to an illegal cartel under EU competition rules. The Commission stresses these are preliminary findings, and the companies have the right to examine the evidence, respond in writing, and request an oral hearing before any final decision is made. One of the companies, Saint-Gobain, which owns Chryso, says it's cooperating fully with the investigation and continues to see no reason to expect any material financial impact. Other companies have yet to comment publicly. Now, if the Commission ultimately concludes the companies breached EU competition law, they could face fines of up to 10% of their annual global turnover, potentially running into billions of euros for some of the industry's biggest players. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
And before we go, Spain's World Cup winners have received a hero's welcome in Madrid, with nearly 2 million fans joining the celebrations.
It was a hero's welcome for Spain's World Cup winning football team on Monday, as celebrations swept the capital, Madrid. The squad was first welcomed at Zarzuela Palace, where King Felipe, Queen Letizia, and Princesses Leonor and Sofia congratulated the players and coaching staff on their historic triumph. The team then met Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez at Moncloa Palace, where he praised their achievement.
But even those of us who are not football experts have greatly enjoyed watching you play. I thank you for your effort, because it is true that even when you are good, reaching nothing less than a World Cup final is no easy task.
From there, the celebrations moved onto the streets, with the players boarding an open-top bus for a victory parade through Madrid. Government estimates said close to 2 million people lined the route, many wearing Spain's jerseys and waving red and gold flags to celebrate Sunday's 1-0 victory over Argentina in the World Cup final in New Jersey.
You can see it. All of Spain is in Madrid. I got here by train this morning from Barcelona, and trains from all over are arriving. I think this will be the beginning of something amazing.
Seeing the bus was amazing. Many times I thought the players weren't real, as if it was fiction on the other side of the screen. Seeing them bringing another World Cup, such a united team, it was spectacular.
The parade ended at Madrid's iconic Cibeles Square, where the players and head coach Luis de la Fuente were formally introduced to thousands of cheering supporters, bringing a memorable day of national celebration to a close.
That's the news for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for all the latest updates.